bring in our panel now. Donatella Rovera is the author of that Amnesty International report and investigates war crimes for the organization. In Washington, D.C., we have former U.S. military spokesman Mark Kimmitt. And in Tempe, Arizona, is Abdalazizi Alhamza, a journalist and founder of the campaign Raqqa is being slaughtered silently. I thank you all for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Abdalazizi Alhamza, let me start with you. As someone from Raqqa, do you believe that this is what happened, that the coalition recklessly killed more than 1,600 civilians in trying to defeat Daesh?
Yes, of course. So my organization, Raqqa is being slaughtered silently, reported after the battle that we documented the number of civilians and people who have been killed by the airstrike, and the number was more than 1,400. That was like only within 100 days of the battle. And later on, we discovered like too many misgraphs in the city where people were like under rubble, and the number is like way more than that. We've been reporting that the coalition has been responsible about the death of thousands of Syrians, and I would say the last 2 years before ISIS has been defeated in Raqqa, most of the civilians who've been killed in Raqqa, they were like killed by the coalition, and the number was like the number of civilians who've been killed by the coalition has been way more than the number of civilians who've been killed by ISIS.
Okay, and it's worth remembering that Raqqa is being slaughtered silently, or your group has been one of the main sources informing us about Daesh atrocities over the years, right? So you have no dog in this fight to accuse the coalition. Mark Kimmitt, if it's true, General Kimmitt, that the coalition, their strikes on Raqqa in the name of defeating Daesh killed more than 1,600 civilians, is it worth it?
Well, first of all, Imran, I note that you asked the question different of me than you did of your previous guest. To your previous guest, you said, did the coalition kill and recklessly carry out these missions? And the answer is, of course, they did not carry out these missions.
He's not the former U.S. military
spokesman. But I also did this for 30 years as a soldier on the ground. I directed artillery strikes as my profession. I brought in airstrikes as my profession.
I'm asking you very, very simply, and I don't know where the difference is. You're two different guests. I'm asking you, if this is true, based on the available evidence, was it worth it that in order to defeat Daesh, more than 1,600 civilians needed to die?
You could use that argument for war in general, Imran. No, war is not worth it. People die. Innocent people die. Innocent people are caught up in the crossfire. There's no way to put a value on that in terms of saying, was it worth it or not? Anytime you have to go to war, you have made a decision that you know is going to take lives. And no, in that case, war is never worth it. But for the specific issue of defeating Daesh, it was necessary to carry out precision strikes with both artillery and aircraft so that the people of Raqqa, the vast majority of people of Raqqa, would no longer be slaughtered, as your other guest said they were, silently being slaughtered by ISIS.
Right. General Kimmitt, the coalition currently rejects the claim by Amnesty International, and they say 180 people died, so that's 9 times less. Do you have any reason to dispute Amnesty's claim, or is that just boilerplate stuff that's coming from the coalition right now?
No, I don't think it's boilerplate stuff coming from the coalition, but nor am I getting in an argument with Amnesty International. They do good work. They are a great oversight organization. But I think there will be times when the coalition in its investigations is going to come up to a different conclusion than Amnesty International will. The fundamental issue is, did the coalition, as you said, carry out these missions recklessly with disregard for civilian lives? And the answer is no.
Okay, Donatella Rovera, not reckless. Respond to that.
First of all, the coalition has not yet been on the ground to investigate. They don't even pretend to have been. So while their methodology says that where possible, they will carry out site visits and interviews with witnesses and survivors, they have not done so in Raqqa, even though it is possible to do so. Myself and my colleagues went to Raqqa multiple times, spent months, visited more than 200 sites of strikes. and interviewed more than 400 survivors and witnesses. So there is no impediment for the coalition to do so. And it is regrettable that they haven't done so up to now.
Right.
The 180 cases that the coalition has admitted so far are almost all cases that were investigated and submitted to them by Amnesty International and Air Wars.
Okay.
So again, it's regrettable that they're waiting for us NGOs to do the work that it is ultimately their responsibility to do. When it comes to airstrikes, I would make 2 points. Artillery is not precise, is a battlefield weapon. Each artillery shell, unguided ones, overwhelming majority of the artillery shells used in Raqqa, more than 30,000 according to the US Marines who operated from the base outside Raqqa, is the number they launched into Raqqa. And the unguided shells, each of those has a margin of error of more than 100 meters. In a city where 10 meters can make the difference between a legitimate military target and a house full of civilians, that is not the right munitions to use.
Okay.
It is an inexpensive munition compared to others, but it's not the right one. When it comes to airstrikes, they did use precision munitions, but precision munitions are only as good as your intelligence, and they're only as good as the resources you're willing to put in to verify the airstrikes. In many cases, airstrikes were coming in within 10 minutes of having been called by the forces on the ground, which means that very little time went into verifying the targets. And last but not least, the payload of the munition that was used was very large. Mostly what they used were your MK type of bombs, which are not your most sophisticated piece of kit.
Okay.
And they do cause civilian casualty way, way beyond the point of impact.
Okay, so General Kimmitt, let's try and address this, right? Heavy payloads. So on the one hand, with airstrikes, possibly based on bad intel. So yes, precision airstrikes, but getting the wrong people. And secondly, using artillery in densely populated parts of Raqqa are inaccurate and indiscriminate because you know they're so close to innocent civilians. Do you accept that?
Well, let's first start with the artillery. Again, as I said, I did that for 30 years. I know how to direct artillery, and Donatella's exactly right. Her facts are correct. The margin of error is about 100 meters, which is why we typically don't use unguided artillery in cities. Now, in fact, what we have developed are rounds that are precision, they are guided, and they're called Excalibur rounds. Now, I don't know to what percent of Excalibur guided munitions were used in the artillery and unguided, but I would tell you that if I was an artillery observer and told to fire artillery at a target inside a city, I would know that violated the rules of engagement. So again, I don't have the complete facts, but it would strike me as very unusual if the rules of engagement allowed unguided artillery rounds into the city.
Okay.
Full stop.
Okay.
Now, on the issue of the airstrikes.
Okay. Finish your point, General Kimmitt. Go ahead.
No, let's wait to the next one. The airstrike is a long explanation as well.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to add that the overwhelming majority of artillery rounds that were used in Raqqa were unguided. They were not Excalibur. That's a fact. It's not disputed.
Okay. General Kimmitt?
If she has those facts, I can't dispute them. So I would ask the question, where was it in the rules of engagement that permitted them the use of unguided artillery in highly populated areas? I don't think that's within the rules of investigation. And if there's substantial evidence that unguided artillery was used in violation of the rules of engagement, then that should be investigated. But I think there's more to this story than is coming across in this show.
Abdalazizi Alhamza, how do we ensure that people won't join terror groups or even rejoin a Daesh resurgence if they've had their family members killed in coalition airstrikes?
Yeah, just to mention something so quickly. So when the coalition started targeting Raqqa, they were like so careful with their airstrike. and they're shelling. And all civilians there, they would tell me that. But later on, I think with the change of the administrations, change with the plans, they turned to be reckless. So they would bomb the city randomly. People would be walking in the street, and they also targeted a school where they were like all refugees. And there are like many reports about that. That like was responsible of the death of like hundreds of civilians in one day. So ISIS and other like extremism group have been using this as an excuse. ISIS would go around, show photos of like killed kids, children, not only to the people of Raqqa, they publish it online. They call people all over the world. They call Muslims to carry attacks
Right.
wherever they are. So ISIS has been using the atrocities that have been committed by the international community to encourage like terrorist attacks all over. So it's gonna be like a hard mission
Right.
to defeat ISIS ideology with all these atrocities that have been committed by the international community. So
Abdulaziz,
it's so hard to.
yeah, Abdulaziz, let me ask you, these new pictures came out, a new video came out purporting to be Abu Bakr Baghdadi. How do you feel about that? Baghdadi, in a way, saying you might have taken away our territory, you might have killed a lot of our fighters, you might have even consoled yourself, you might have killed civilians, but consoled yourself with the fact that you defeated Daesh by killing those civilians along the way. But then Baghdadi comes out and says, I'm still here and I'm not dead and the group is still alive. How do you feel about that, Abdulaziz, as somebody from Raqqa?
Yeah, it's not so sad. Like for me, as a person from Raqqa who've been fighting for like Syrians, for the people of Raqqa, always wanted or wait. We've been always waiting for the second when ISIS would be defeated, but it's not in this scenario. And recently, like watching this video, having Abu Bakr Baghdadi alive, it's like a pessimistic thing. And again, it's like another message that al-Baghdadi is sending to say we are here as an ideology, even if you would defeat us as armed and groups. And he's been calling to do attacks all over, and especially in France. So I'm like so afraid that this like the strategy or the way how ISIS has been defeated would support and make the ideology of ISIS stronger than before.
Okay, and it's interesting to get your view on that. Donatella Rovera, we did get a response from the coalition, and the coalition undoubtedly has put this out there. You probably came across this, but it's, for our viewers' sake, it's worth noting what the coalition said. They said, we requested that Amnesty International provide us with additional information on the remaining 43 allegations, if they have it, so that we would be able to determine whether we could conduct an investigation. To date, Amnesty International has not provided any additional data. Is that true, Donatella?
We've submitted to them 86 new cases with GPS location and dates, very different from what the coalition provides, which is within a 100-meter radius. So they have, for the overwhelming majority, out of those 86 new cases, and each new case contains multiple casualties, they only admitted 3 cases. They said in one case they had injured 1 civilian, whereas the 1 civilian was killed. In another case, they said they accidentally killed 2 civilians, whereas the number of civilians who were killed in that strike was 4. And in another case, where it concerns 6 civilian casualties, they gave us a response from last year, which was about 30 casualties in a nearby location. All the other cases, they responded, it's still pending, we don't know. We also requested from the coalition specific information about every specific attacks, in the same way as we are very specific with the information that we submit as to the exact GPS location and the exact date of the attacks. We requested, for example, the kind of exact munition that was used, how long the target had been under observation for, what measures were taken to verify that that target was a military target and not civilians. They have not responded to any of this. They've just referred us to the website. As for the information, the coalition can find absolutely everything, because all the information about every single strike is online at raqqa.amnesty.org. It contains the GPS location of every strike, photograph of the victims, names of the victims, dates. All the information is there, not just for the coalitions to see, but for everybody to see.
Right. Go to Amnesty's website. It's the site, the Strike Trackers Project. Excuse me, the Strike Trackers Project.
The Strike Tracker Project was a component.
Okay.
The site where all the information is available is raqqa.amnesty.org.
Okay, that's important for all of us to have a look at. Okay, thank you, Donatella. General Kimmitt, nested in Abdalaziz's answer there, based on anecdotal and eyewitness evidence, is that things were a bit more careful beforehand, and then there was a change of administration and things seemed to be a bit more loose and possibly reckless. Is that true, that the Trump administration has more loose rules of engagement when it comes to airstrikes and artillery in Raqqa?
Well, I didn't hear everything that he said because most of what he was saying was so ridiculous I stopped listening. When he starts alleging that the coalition was intentionally killing innocent children and women and civilians, I just turned that off because for the simple reason that none of that is true. I much prefer to listen to people such as Donatella, who has facts, objective information, and is trying to do the right thing in an oversight capacity, not simply a guest who is making up falsehoods based on thin evidence and nothing to back it up with.
Abdalaziz?
So I'm from there. I have people. I lost my uncle in the airstrike. At the same time, I lost my colleague there. When we were talking about ISIS atrocities, no one even heard about it. So I'm not saying that the international coalition intend to kill civilians, but they intend to defeat ISIS in whatever way. And they didn't care if the civilians would be killed or not. So they didn't go there, of course, to kill civilians. Their main goal is to defeat ISIS. But they didn't care about the civilians who've been living there. We've witnessed everything. We've documented everything. Before Raqqa battle, like in a couple of months, they were like so careful. We talk with people there on the daily basis. We talk with our relatives, with our families, with people that we know there. So I'm not talking as a guest. I'm talking as someone from the city, as someone who knows like hundreds of people in the city, and they were like keeping us updated on the daily basis. So we knew that they were like so careful before the battle in a couple of months. The main goal was like to get rid of ISIS regardless of anything else. So I'm not saying they went and attempted to kill civilians, but they wanted to defeat ISIS and they didn't care about the civilians over there.
Okay, I've got to wrap, but it's been an important conversation to have. Donatella Rovera, Abdalazizi Alhamza, and Mark Kimmitt, I thank you all for joining us on the Newsmakers.